Welcome in, whiskey freaks, to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. I'm John Stark, and I'll be your host today. And I'm going to be bringing you, as always, candid and sometimes irreverent whiskey news, whiskey opinions, whiskey reviews, and we're going to talk about the industry and the products they've been bringing us for hundreds of years. Today we get right down to business and do a head-to-head against a couple straight bourbon whiskeys. And you may have, you definitely have heard of at least one of these. Buffalo Trace Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And we're going to put it up against one you may have never heard of, Clyde May's Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And both of these bad boys have storied histories. Since I'm into history, we're going to spend a bit of time setting the stage before I get into the tasting and review. Now, I'm having a squirrel moment right now. I stumbled upon this cat not that long ago. He interviewed Ray Franklin of Garrett County Distilling, this podcaster guy. And what really caught my attention was his kind of over-the-top approach. It was like, hey, everybody, we're here. We're going to talk about bourbon whiskey today. We got Ray Franklin from Garrett County. Oh, yeah. Okay. Dude, it like wore me out. Listen, now, I couldn't stop listening to this guy. But it like made me tired. Like it was difficult to listen because, now listen, I am not God's gift to podcasting. I know this. I've only been doing this just over a year. We're going up on 60 episodes, give or take. Look, I'm not a pro. I'm pretty much a dumbass. I get all that. But that being said, this guy, whoa, yeah, we're good. Okay. It was too much, but I couldn't stop listening. Is that something you guys are interested in? Now listen, let me explain. This was like a cross between Pauly Shore and Tony Robbins on crack. Do you guys know this cat? Am I ringing a bell here? Do you guys? And again, you can Google Ray Franklin and Bourbon Podcast. You can probably find this guy. It was a decent interview, right? But it was really over the top. And I don't know how to... Okay, I'm not changing what I do here. I'm just curious to know, is that something you guys really like? Do you like that kind of, I'm putting on a big show routine? Because that's not what we do here, right? You know what we do here? We're honest. We're pretty much shooting it straight. Do I have a lot of goofy sarcasm? Maybe. But you're not going to get a lot... Okay. All right, Vlad. Remember Vlad? I'm only going to say his name once. He was pissed off that I use different voices here on the show. But I definitely don't yell about bourbon like this guy. Anyway, kind of a squirrel moment here for me. I apologize. Do you like that? Is that something that you like? I don't know. Reach out to me. Like I said, not changing my show, but this guy's show, over the top, you might like it. And I'm not going to say his name because, hell, we might be friends one day. I don't know. The dude seems like a cool dude, but his approach is just way different than mine. I just thought I would say that, would share that with y'all. Okay, I'm done with that. So, back to my blind tasting today. So I want to start with a bit of recent history about these guys, Buffalo Trace and Clyde Mays. So, I was lucky enough to stop by the Buffalo Trace Distillery last week. I'm sorry, guys. Sometimes it just comes out. Okay. So, went by Buffalo Trace last week after what was a fantastic trip in the National Forest, the Daniel Boone National Forest. And we visited the in-laws out at the Red River Gorge in Kentucky. Now, if you've never done it, Google Red River Gorge. If you're within 6 or 7 hours of it, you should do it. There's unlimited hiking, relaxation in the woods. There's enough food around that you'll not starve. And you can have a fire pit. You can chill out with a cold drink or a beverage of your choice around the fire pit. It's a total home run. Hot tub. Don't forget the hot tub. You got to check it out. Anyway, there's all kinds of places you can VRBO out there or Verbo, whatever, however the hell you say that. Anyway, check it out. So, on the way home, we were able to swing by the Buffalo Trace Distillery. And for as much shit as I give them, I stop by almost every time we come home. And sadly, they did not have any Eagle Rare 12 that day, which they had not that long ago. And sadly, the day before, they had Stag. And the day before that, they had Elmer T. Lee. So I missed those 2 days because we were relaxing in the Red River Gorge, just an hour and 20 minutes away from the distillery. I'll trade that any day for the nice time we had out in the woods. But I did pick up some Weller's Special Reserve and E.H. Taylor's small batch there at the distillery on the way home. The Weller was like $30. You can't find Weller for $30 anywhere around here, guys, unless you bribe the shopkeep, right? And the E.H. Taylor was $59.99. And I know, anymore, at least around here, you can find Taylor now. You can find it at Schnucks. You can find it at some of the other liquor stores around town. You can find it for about that same price. I just think it's cool to grab it at the distillery, and that's just me. The Weller for $30? Are you kidding? Look, I'm not a tater, you guys know that, but I do love Weller. I'm not going to lie about it, and you can't find it around here for $30. So anyway, pick that up. So there's that. Anyway, my greater point here is that we went upstairs to the tasting area. Now they've completely redone and refurbished the distillery after the flooding they had this year. It was devastating. But it did allow them or afford them the opportunity to redo the place. And they've kind of redone the way they do tasting now. You go upstairs and there's a tasting area. And in the old days, meaning last year, there was a tasting table and you went to the tasting table. Now they have tasting, like not cubicles, but kind of stations. And there are several of them. And you actually go to your own tasting station with a group of 4 or 5. It happened to just be my wife and I, so we got our own tasting station, our own tasting expert, and they offered tastings. One of the offerings was Eagle Rare 12. They were offering Buffalo Trace, Saz, and Weller Special Reserve as well. So the wife and I partook, or whatever the hell you call that, and I was pretty damn excited to try the Eagle Rare 12. And I'm not going to give anything away. I'm not going to give you my take on Eagle Rare 12 yet. I want to get my hands on that bottle, which I still haven't done, hopefully without selling a kidney. And sooner or later, I am going to review it here on the pod. But I don't want to tell you what I think about Eagle Rare 12. Suffice it to say, I do want to review it. Now, side note. The table, the tasting table downstairs. There's one table downstairs at the bottom of the steps. You walk right off the steps. There it stands. And at that tasting table, that's where you can sample, I think it's Freddy's Root Beer and Traveler Whiskey. Yeah, nobody was at that tasting table. No one. Not a soul. Go figure. Anyway, I do know, and I learned this during our tasting, Eagle Rare. This is just a fun fact for you guys today. Eagle Rare, all Eagle Rare is aged on the bottom floor of the rickhouse. It's true. I didn't know that. Like I said, I'm a novice at this, learning, sharing what I learned. Our tasting guide was super cool, and I asked her to clarify, really, is that true? And she said it is absolutely true. I'm not sure why that fascinated me, but it did. I wanted to share that with you guys. What she said was that aging on the lowest floor helps with a slower aging process, and it helps maintain consistent and nuanced flavors, because she used big words, nuanced flavors. And by keeping Eagle Rare bottles on the bottom, they can predictably produce that signature taste consistently. That's news you can use, kids. So back to our head-to-head. And like I said, this is a head-to-head, and it is a true blind tasting. And you're thinking, Stark, well, that's the name of the podcast, right? So why aren't all your tastings blind? Well, yeah, that's a good question. There's a good reason for that. And you'll have to read my book to find out what all that means. So sorry, kids. But you're in luck today, because a blind tasting is on the way. The Clyde May bottle. I'm going to start with that one first. The bottle says Clyde Mays, meaning it's named after a dude named Clyde May. You following me? So let's talk about Clyde May first. The dude. Now the name itself, it kind of feels like an old blues song, right? But Clyde May wasn't a marketing creation. So many of these brands that we see today are just that. They're made up out of whole cloth, like, Hezekiah Ray and Zechariah Ray and whatever, right? Not this time. he was a real dude from Alabama. And he's one of those characters that fits perfectly into the whiskey world that we know. He was a farmer. He was a World War II vet. And like a lot of folks in the South at the time, he turned to moonshining as a way to make ends meet. Now, this wasn't the guy with a mason jar in the woods kind of moonshine operation. Clyde was known for being a perfectionist. He wanted his whiskey to taste good, not just get you drunk. And he had this little trick too. Instead of just bottling raw corn whiskey, he'd age his liquor in a charred oak barrel, and then he'd add dried apples into the mix. And that's where you get what became known as Alabama-style whiskey. Yeehaw! Now, this whiskey wasn't flavored whiskey in the modern sense. It was more like a subtle tweak to smooth out the spirit, kind of give it this faint fruit note. Well, word spread, and before long, people were seeking out Clyde's whiskey, even if it meant taking a drive down the back roads to Alabama to get it. Now, run and shine in the South wasn't exactly illegal back then. Okay, it was totally illegal. And it also wasn't safe. In fact, Clyde May actually spent time in prison for moonshining. So he did his stretch, he came out, and he went right back to, guess what? Making whiskey, because that's who he was. That's part of the story around the brand today, too. The idea that this stubborn, hardworking, whiskey-obsessed man who just refused to quit. Let's fast forward a few decades, whiskey freaks. So Clyde passed away in 1990. Yeah, 1990. But his legend lives on. They say his family wanted to legitimize the operation. So in 2001, they started selling Clyde Mays as an official whiskey brand. And at first, they sourced it from Kentucky. Then later, they struck deals with distilleries in Indiana. We know what that means, right? And eventually, they pushed for an official home in Troy, Alabama, which is now the brand's headquarters. Well, get this. In 2004, Alabama officially recognized Clyde Mays as the state's official spirit. So in a way, the outlaw moonshiner became the face of legal whiskey for an entire state. Now today, Clyde May's whiskey lineup includes everything from straight bourbons to rye and even a revival of that old school Alabama-style whiskey with the apple finish. Now the bottle you and I are talking about here today is their 92 proof straight bourbon whiskey, and it's part of their core lineup. It's not made in Alabama just yet, but the brand is working on building its own distillery in Troy as we speak. I even checked their website to make sure it's still going. They're talking about how they are working on that distillery right now. So the story will truly come full circle very, very soon. And they say, you know them? They say when you pour a glass of Clyde Mays, you're not just drinking bourbon, you're tasting a little piece of moonshiner history. It's legal now with fancier packaging, but still carrying that outlaw vibe. So here are the deets on Clyde May's straight bourbon whiskey. It's 92 proof. The distillery, well, they don't have a distillery yet, but they will, and it's going to be called Conecuh. And they say things differently down in Alabama. They're weird in some of these towns. This is spelled C-O-N-E-C-U. So you'd think it's Conecuh. It is not Conecuh. It's Conecuh, because that's how they talk down there. It's Conecuh Ridge Distillery, and it's in Troy, Alabama. But right now, they're still contract distilling by, quote, someone in Indiana. And it even says so here on the bottle. There is no age statement, but it also says on their website that it's 4 to 5 years old, and that's nice that they're upfront about the age statement. The mash bill, okay, it's undisclosed because they're not telling us exactly which distillery they're getting it from or which company they're getting it from in Indiana, but it's most likely, quite possibly, the MGP high rye mash of 75 corn, 21 rye, and 4% malted barley. So you got that 21% rye influence. It is non-chill filtered. Y'all know I love that. Now the price is approximately somewhere in the $40 to $50 range, depending on where you live in the country. But I was lucky enough to grab a bottle here near me. And if you were to buy a bottle near me, it would cost you $37. Now looking at the bottle here, it says on the Clyde Mays bottle, be what you say. Clyde May was a moonshiner by trade, but a craftsman by heart. He made his famous whiskey in a hand-built copper still with fresh Alabama spring water and the finest local ingredients. The man was locked up for his passion, 8 months in the federal penitentiary, yet he started up those copper stills the day he got out. This straight bourbon honors Clyde's dedication to the craft, yada, yada, yada. You get the idea. They are pretty proud of Clyde's story. And if you're into stories, I've got a new book. Yeah, it's true. It's called Whiskey Wisdom and Bourbon BS. Barrel Strength Legends, Lies, and Untold Tales. And no, it's not just one story. It's dozens of stories, actually over 40 stories. Weird, wild, historical truths. Some of it may be true. Some of it absolutely true. Some of it ridiculous. Look, I spent way too many hours researching, writing, rewriting, arguing with myself about it. And yes, a questionable amount of bourbon was consumed in that process. Inside this magical little Kindle book, which, by the way, is available right now on Amazon, you'll find bourbon truths, folklore, stories about outlaw distillers, shady marketing schemes, whiskey-fueled inventions, and the kind of whiskey facts that sound made up because some of them just might be. Guys, I pulled this stuff from the weirdest corners of whiskey history. And the coolest part is, each chapter in the book ends with one simple question. Is it whiskey wisdom or is it BS? And you get to be the judge. Now, personally, I think it's best enjoyed with the pour you're about to keep or collect. Either way, there's no judgment here, kids. Just stories, sips, and a whole lot of whiskey-fueled fun. And the best part is, it's cheap. Yeah, I figure, why charge a ridiculous amount for it, right? This book's been a labor of love for me, and I had a blast cranking this thing out. But don't get me wrong. There were plenty of gnashing of teeth, there were headaches, and even a good amount of laughs putting this book together, too. Anyway, go grab a copy. It's on Kindle over at Amazon.com. You'll find the link in the show notes, as always, or just search my name on Amazon, John Stark, S-T-A-R-C-K. Spell that right. Or you can search by the book title, Whiskey Wisdom and Bourbon BS, Barrel Strength Legends, Lies, and Untold Tales. Guys, it's just $10. That's it. For the price of one bad pour at an airport bar or a whole crappy bottle of Benchmark Old No. 8, which you'll get absolutely zero enjoyment out of, you get a whole damn book full of whiskey chaos. It's my kind of chaos, guys. And hey, if you grab a copy today, there's a chance my wife won't leave me. And I might just get to keep making more podcast episodes for all y'all whiskey freaks. It's a win-win, right? Whiskey Wisdom and Bourbon BS, Barrel Strength Legends, Lies, and Untold Tales. Operators are standing by. The operators are not standing by, but Amazon will take your money. And no, I forgot to say, you can read the book on your Kindle device, and there are other ways to read it without a Kindle. I get so many messages from friends, family, and listeners. Oh, I don't have a Kindle. You don't have to have a Kindle. You don't need a Kindle. Let me say that one more time. You can download the Kindle app. It's free off the internet. Al Gore's amazing internet. It's in the Google Play Store. It's in the Apple Store. And once you download the Kindle app, it works on iPhone, iPad, Android phones, tablets, Google devices, or if you have a computer, you can read it on your computer from Amazon. Anyway, log in with your Amazon account, and then boom, your book is going to be right there. Well, it'll be there after you pay for it anyway. So you've got options. There are no excuses, whiskey freaks. Do it now. But seriously, guys, it means a lot to me. And if you do snag the book, here's what I need you to do. I need you to plop down on the patio, light up a cigar, or don't. I'm not your mom. Pour yourself something good. Have a few laughs along the way. And hey, who knows? You might, I said you might, even learn something. That's Whiskey Wisdom and Bourbon BS, Barrel Strength Legends, Lies, and Untold Tales. And I know it's annoying when dudes do this all, they seem like they just keep hawking and talking and go on and on about their new book. It's aggravating. So in order to avoid this aggravation, just buy the book. Easy peasy, guys. Thanks. Now let's move on to our good friends at Buffalo Trace. Buffalo Trace is one of those distilleries that almost feels bigger than bourbon itself, right? The place has been around so long that when you talk about its history, you're really talking about the history of bourbon in general in the United States. The distillery sits in Frankfort, Kentucky, right along the Kentucky River, which is why it flooded earlier this year. And it's on a spot there that's seen whiskey made since the late 1700s. Back then, pioneers and settlers were pushing west, and this patch of land was perfect. They had limestone filtered water from the river, fertile ground for corn, and a convenient location along what they call a buffalo trace, which is one of those game trails carved out by animals, and this one was carved out by bison migrating through the region. And that's where the distillery eventually got its modern name. The early roots go back to a guy named Hancock Lee, who was making whiskey there in 1775. Fast forward a few decades, and in 1812 a distillery was built on the same grounds. That distillery would change hands, names, and fortunes over the years, but the thread of whiskey making never really broke. In 1870, this is a long history, guys, but it's important. In 1870, a man named Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr. Ring a bell? E.H. Taylor. That is a name that all bourbon drinkers know well. Now, he bought the place and upgraded it into one of the most advanced distilleries of the time. I'm not sure how advanced you get in 1870, but he was at the top of the line, right? Taylor introduced things like climate-controlled warehouses, which might not sound all that exciting until you realize he was basically reinventing how bourbon aged at the time. Another big player stepped in, and his name was George T. Stagg. Now, under his ownership, the distillery grew into a powerhouse and started building the reputation it still rides today. The name George T. Stagg Distillery, that would stick for decades. And here's the kicker. When Prohibition hit in the 1920s, the distillery didn't go dark. They were lucky enough. Unlike so many others that boarded up their doors, Stagg was one of the few that scored a government contract and license to keep producing whiskey for medicinal purposes. And that little loophole, well, that kept the brand alive while others disappeared completely. Tragic. After Prohibition, the distillery just kept going. It survived the ups and downs of bourbon's popularity through the 20th century, and by the 1990s, bourbon, well, unfortunately, had hit a slump. But in 1999, the owner's Sazerac company, the Bourbon Gods, right? They rebranded the whole operation at Buffalo Trace, and that's when things really exploded. They leaned into the history, they polished up the distillery, they started releasing what are now some of the most sought after and allocated whiskeys on the planet, right? Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, Pappy Van Winkle, Blanton's, Weller, E.H. Taylor, all that good stuff, right? And that all comes out of their warehouses in Frankfort, Kentucky. But at the core of it all, their flagship bourbon, what we're talking about today, Buffalo Trace Straight Bourbon Whiskey, unfortunately, they don't print an age statement. Now, for a lot of folks, it's the gold standard of an affordable, well-made bourbon. And I got to admit, I do keep Buffalo Trace around as a staple. It's in my University of Nebraska decanter. And I'm not a tater, like I said, but look, it's Buffalo Trace. It's kind of bourbon, right? It's bourbon. So I have it around. It's affordable. And let's be honest, it's gotten popular enough that finding it on shelves can be difficult. Again, it's a lot like E.H. Taylor has become recently, where you can find it more often, but when you can pick it up, and again, if you can get it at the distillery for $25, you may as well just grab one, right? Anyway, so I mentioned the distilleries, Buffalo Trace. They're in Franklin County, Kentucky, and Frankfort. That's the state capital of Kentucky. Not talking down to you, anybody out there. You remember we went through Vlad and his bullshit. Look, I'm not talking down. I'm learning as I spread the knowledge, right? Spreading the knowledge today, guys. Yeah, no, it's not Casey Kasem. Anyway, Buffalo Trace, Frankfort, Kentucky, 90 proof, aged approximately 6 to 7 years, like I said. And I confirmed this at the distillery last week, although some folks on the interwebs have said it's really as much as 8 to 10 years old. I trust the tasting expert who was walking us through our tasting at the tasting table, standing on the second floor of the Buffalo Trace Distillery. She said it was 6 to 7 years old, and that's who I'm going to trust today, personally. The mash bill, well, again, it's Buffalo Trace, so they don't tell you exactly. We know it's mash bill, or at least we assume it's mash bill number 1, and it's the same mash bill as Eagle Rare, Benchmark, Stagg, E.H. Taylor, and all those good ones. Now, this is the one thing about it that I don't like. It is chill filtered. To me, I believe that takes away some of the potential flavors, esters, all the little goodies that are in there. Sometimes They chill filter it. Look, I'm not in charge there. Harlan is. Good for him. It seems to work. The price, it's approximately $30 to $35 in the wild, and I'm starting to see it all over the place, thankfully, but you can always get it at the Frankfort, Kentucky distillery for less than that at the gift shop. I think I paid $25 for this. All right, Whiskey Freaks, so let's get down to the business of drinking. And today we're doing a blind bourbon showdown. I've got two glasses here in front of me. I do have the bottles nearby. Actually, I have the bottle of Clyde May's nearby, and I have my decanter, like I mentioned, of Buffalo Trace nearby. But I have two glasses here in front of me. And thanks to my beautiful assistant, I do not know which one of these glasses has which of these bourbons. But I've got the bottles nearby because we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I have two numbers. I've got my glasses numbered 1 and 2. One of them contains Clyde May's 92 proof. One contains Buffalo Trace 90 proof. I don't know which is which. And that, my friends, is what makes this extra fun. And that's why it's a blind tasting. Like I said, if you want to know what or why I only do blind tastings every once in a while, get the book. You're going to know within the first little bit of the book. Anyway, so I've got these in front of me here. And this is going to be super fun today because I don't know what I'm tasting. And that's kind of the fun part. The flavors are going to tell the story today. Here we go. Okay, so I have the two glasses that have already been poured and already been mixed up. I don't know what's here. My beautiful assistant does know. Glass number 1 and glass number 2. So let's talk about the colors first. I always like to start there. And I always say this, never judge the color in the bottle alone. Well, I can't compare it in the bottle alone. It's sitting too far away from me. I can see the bottles, but I can't see what's really in the bottle. So you've got to pour it into a glass, and that's where you're going to evaluate the color. Again, not talking down to you, Vlad, just educating. Anyway, I'm looking at each one of these glasses. They have the exact same amount of whiskey poured into them. And at least initially, the glass on the left has a little bit darker color in it. And, you know, to me, the color sometimes will give you an idea of the breadth of flavors you're about to put in your mouth. It's my opinion. I'm going to say this every time, guys. The darker the hue of the whiskey in your glass, the deeper the flavors. It's not always true. It is sometimes, and it's worth noting. And I will note it every single time. So glass 1, to me, looking at this bad boy, it's an amber in color, kind of like amberish, maybe just a little bit of light brownish going on. And glass number 2, it's a deep amber, but not as dark as glass number 1. So we're off and running. And I'm not sure if I can really make any judgments at this point, but like I said, many times a darker color means older or stronger flavors. But who knows? Let's get to the nosing. All right, let's nose glass number 1. Yeah, I'm getting that traditional vanilla, caramel, a little bit of fruity, like pear, maybe a little bit of hay. And I always try to differentiate that there are different flavors of hay, just like there are different flavors or smells of honey. This is like a sweet hay. It's very nice. It's not like dry grass. It's like sweet. Not really getting anything oak here. Interesting. If there is any oak here, it's imperceptible. And for those of you with infinity bottles, that means difficult or impossible to notice. Lots of vanilla, lots of caramel, maybe a tinge here of brown sugar too. Oh no, that's about all I'm getting off the nose, guys. Let's go on to the tasting here. Oh wait, no. Let me nose number 2 real quick. Sorry, I'm not used to this blind tasting format. Glass number 2. I'm going to nose it a little bit here. Okay, there's more depth here right off the bat. I'm getting like a deeper aromas here. Like the caramel's a little stronger. I'm getting a little bit of vanilla. That's about all. Maybe a little bit of citrus. Not like a lemon, like an orange. And there may be there is oak in here. It's more perceptible than in glass one, but not a ton. Number one, imperceptible. This one, a little bit. Yeah, other than that, I think that's all I'm getting here. Not super complex, but very nice. All right, let's taste these. I'm going to start with number one, of course. I'm going to get a first sip. Here we go. I need to mention, I'm getting absolutely zero alcohol or ethanol on the nose. Absolutely zero on number one, which is nice. It's a little thin, and that kind of makes me sad. But it does have, let me get one more sip real quick. Okay, it's leaning towards thin, but it does have a decent mouthfeel. It's coating the tongue, it's coating the inside of the mouth pretty well. All right, so I'm gonna go medium on the mouthfeel. Let me get another sip. Okay, yeah, the caramel's there. I'm getting a citrusy note in here that kind of borders on slightly sour. And I think it's more like a spicy pepper. Or like if you've ever had a steak with peppercorn sauce on it, it's kind of like that. And it's not often I use peppercorn in a review, but yet here I am using it. It's just the best way I can describe the way that this is hitting me, really. Let me get one more sip. Okay, the finish on this is pretty long, but it's mostly like an oaky, peppery finish, and the sweetness I got on the nose, it's kind of being overpowered by that peppery note. It's not okay. It is kind of fruity too. The pear is there that I got on the nose, but it's getting overpowered by that spicy, peppery, kind of oaky thing too. Let me get one more sip of number one. There might be just the slightest bit of nutmeg in here too. That really adds to this. It's not super complex, but it's pretty decent. Let me clear my palate and sip on number two. Okay, glass number two. I'm going to get a sip. I'm going to do the Kentucky Chew. Okay, so lots of caramel and oak here. Right away, I got to say this one is thicker or more viscous than number one. The mouthfeel is better. Let me get another sip to really evaluate this. Vanilla, caramel, the things that you expect. And the oakiness in here, it's smoother than number one. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, and I really hate saying smooth, but here I am saying it. But it's the best way I can describe how that oakiness is coming through. It's not a rough oak. Let me jump back to let me set this down. I'm going to jump back to number one real quick. So with number one, I'm getting a bit of heat in the back of the throat, and there's this woody kind of earthy undertone. I think that kind of maybe that's part of the peppercorn that I was tasting, and that citrus I was getting. It gives it it's more like a lemony or a zesty edge, whereas I think I'm getting more of an orange citrusy out of number two. Anyway, let me go back to number two. Let me clear my palate again. And get a sip of number two again. You have to use your imagination, guys. Yeah. Number two finishes well. And the vanilla is really strong. It does have a bit of spiciness to it, but it's not rough or whatever. I mean, I don't want to use smooth again, and I'm just referring to the oak in the taste, right? And I get less heat out of number 2 as well. Okay, guys, it is the moment of truth. It is reveal time. All right, so glass 1, let me look under. Glass number 1 is Clyde May's 92 proof. And glass number 2, is gonna, we're not gonna do it. Glass number 2 is Buffalo Trace, obviously. I just wanted to verify by looking under the sticker. I'm not gonna lie. I got fooled on the color. And I talk about that every time, that you can tell, blah, 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 right? I talk about the color. Well, number 1, the Clyde May's is just slightly darker in color than the Buffalo Trace. And I expected more from it than what I got. Now, it's good. I'm definitely going to keep the bottle. It's a keep it, right? But the Buffalo Trace, number 2, it just had more depth and better mouthfeel and a finish that actually made me want to sip more. When the Clyde May's, well, it smelled better on the nose and it looked better. But the finish kind of killed it for me. Too much peppercorn spice or whatever. Too much going on there for me. Almost a sour, earthy note that I just can't get past. Now, still, I'm going to keep it. But number 2, or Buffalo Trace, it wasn't amazing. It wasn't a symphony in my mouth. It just had more going on. Spectacular? No, it wasn't. It wasn't spectacular. But drinkable? Yeah, it sure was. Look, Buffalo Trace is just more palatable than the Clyde May's. Clyde May's not terrible, not bad. But it's $36, guys. And if you can get the Buffalo Trace at the distillery you're going to get it for less than 30, right? And remember, I did my best here to pair up a pretty decent matchup, I thought. Proof points very close at 92 and 90. Ages, pretty close. The Clyde being 4 to 5 years. Buffalo Trace 6 to 7 or so. But the nose on the Clyde had me chomping at the bit to taste it. But then, well, I tasted it. Now, maybe, and I say maybe, once they get their own distillery up and running down in Alabama and they start producing their own recipe, who knows? Maybe then they can craft a better bourbon. But for now, and I'm gonna tell you, I have a love-hate relationships lots of times with our good friends at Buffalo Trace, but the tasting notes just don't lie. Buffalo Trace to me today, in my blind tasting, is the winner. And I don't mean they won by 10 links, right? It was more of a win by a stride or two, not going away. So yeah, I'm going to keep the Clyde. I'm going to keep the Buffalo Trace. So keep it and keep it. And like I mentioned, I've got Buffalo Trace in my Nebraska decanter. It's what I share when I need a newbie to get a taste of decent bourbon. So I wouldn't say I'm biased or obsessed with it. Remember, this was blind. And as always, I'm going to be honest and truthful. Because, guys, we work too damn hard for our money for me to get free bourbon and then tell you a story or stretch the truth about it, right? Would I buy the Clyde Mays again? Probably not anytime soon. I consider the Buffalo Trace kind of a staple. I feel like you got to have it here on hand. I think after all, it is kind of an entry-level bourbon from really one of the most influential distilleries in all of the world. Love them, like them, hate them. You know how I feel about Traveler and Millennium and all that, but they're Buffalo Trace. So I say grab a bottle, maybe grab a second bottle to have on hand. It's a great entry point for newbies, and it's a decent daily sipper. There's a reason folks clamor over it. Is it amazing? Is it super amazing? No, but it's good. And sometimes that's all you need. Something good, something steady, something you can rely on, something you don't have to think too hard about, right? When you just want to pour at the end of the day. I mean, really, not every bottle has to blow your socks off, right? Well, that's all I've got for today, Whiskey Freaks. Thanks for listening to the Blind Tasting Podcast, your number one attitudinal bourbon destination. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to go over to @BlindTastingPodcast on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to do the things, mash the buttons, whatever magical device you use, do the things. That way I can spread the word. That way we can have more episodes, and maybe my wife will stay with me for a little bit longer. I don't know. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you soon.